Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next edition of AmiSights. I'm Ami Kassar, your host, along with my co-host, Lynn Ozer, aka SBA Queen. So excited to have my friend here all the way from Salt Lake City, Robin Huling. Robin is the queen of communications, the queen of culture, just an all-out, really inspiring person who does a lot for our community and teaches a lot of webinars for us and helps a lot of people out. Robin, thanks for being here. What's going on today?
Thanks for having me. Well, we are in celebrating back to school still. All the kids are on the bus and gone. So that is a benefit. No, like holding things down, turning things off in the office. So
That's always an interesting day. I remember back then.
I know, yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Not for them, but for us.
It's good. Yeah. Luckily, the last couple of weeks of summer gets kind of boring when it's too hot to do anything outside. So the first couple of weeks, they're very excited to go back. We'll see how it goes next.
Yeah, that's
Next
right.
month.
They'll come home tonight with 9,000 things for you to sign.
All the things to sign. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or is it all online now?
I wish. No, there's
No.
lots of signing. And I get caught up in this situation where I'm like, just sign my name because they're in elementary school. And I'm like, no, don't
Don't give them any
yeah,
ideas.
don't. Just sign it for me. But
So Robin, tell, maybe Ami knows this, but start at the beginning for me and tell me, how did you get into this business?
well, it's so interesting because I was really bad in school. In high school, I barely graduated high school, but I lived in Florida, Gainesville, Florida, and I lived in a college city, which I partied a lot with the college kids, but was never going to be smart enough to actually go to college with them. So after I graduated high school, I knew I did not want to bum around Gainesville anymore. So I moved down to Orlando and started working for Walt Disney World.
How about that?
It was really exciting. I got to work at the Contemporary Resort, which is the flagship resort with the monorail goes through. So it was really magical. And then the pixie dust does wear off and it's a real job. And I was trying to look for other opportunities. And back in the 90s, I don't know if either of you remember, but Planet Hollywood was huge, the big restaurant chain.
Yes.
Sylvester Stallone and Demi Moore and Bruce Willis and Patrick Swayze. And so I thought, oh, if I could get into this restaurant, my life would be made. And so I waited, I think, 6 hours to get an interview at Planet Hollywood. And I got the job. And then that just was the trajectory of my leadership path. I started traveling the world and opening up new restaurants for them.
Oh, that's exciting. Where was the first one in Orlando?
No, my very first one was the first one was in New York, I think in Miami. Then we opened up. The Orlando one was the busiest restaurant in the world at the time that we were there. And that was really cool. They sent me to open up Amsterdam. I got sent to Singapore at the time at 20 years old. I had never even heard of Singapore before. So that was really exciting, and did the Miami thing. And
That's
then
great.
they had offshoots. I don't know, All Star Sports Cafe. They went a little crazy with the restaurants, but then traveling gets a little old, and I wanted to go back to school. And my favorite management team was going over to City Walk for Universal Studios, which was the nighttime entertainment and restaurants, and they convinced me to join them over there. And so I took the leap. I went over, I helped them with the opening of Margaritaville, which is really exciting to keep watching. I think Jimmy Buffett is one of the godfathers of branding. Like, he is set the standard of branding himself. And so that was really exciting. And then Universal Studios got a hold of me, and I worked for their leadership development team for a few years until my husband drugged me to Utah. So
interesting spot
So
to
you
go.
get to you get to Utah,
mhm.
and
I
you
got to Utah. Yep, I got to
give
Utah.
up the big corporate gravy train, right? Or not
Well,
quite.
I didn't know it at the time, which was so interesting. Which is what you talked about. One of my passions now is, I think what holds people back is the things that they don't know about, and they're too afraid to ask, and they don't know the different paths that they are able to take on their own. And so I had no idea that my experience and the training that I had would really bridge well into a personal consulting business, and that I didn't need to work for a company or a corporation. And so it wasn't until a company came to find me because of my expertise with the DISC behavior theory, and they wanted to hire me for their team. And I thought, oh, okay. And then they just kept sending my name around and I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, this is going to be really fun. And this is what I really love. And so that's been my passion since 2019, is really helping develop teams and individuals with really realizing their personal strengths and how that affects others and how that can affect them. And then,
So you really didn't plan to become an entrepreneur, so to speak, or being your own boss. It kind of came to you, and then you made the realization, you know what, this is what I should be doing.
yes, I think it's interesting. A whole nother side story would be that I did grow an e-commerce site when my
Yeah.
husband moved me out here. But I think I was actually an entrepreneur by heart. By a very young age, I would steal my neighbors' azaleas off, bundle them back up into bouquets, and then try to sell it back to them all the time. I was a girl at school that took the candy bars to sell. So I was always a natural entrepreneur, but I always assumed that it was a product. So an entrepreneur was selling something and not actually just selling your skill set and your knowledge. And so that was what was interesting to me, is realizing that that opportunity was there.
Mhm.
Robin, does your husband agree with your assessment that he dragged you to Utah and all that?
Yes,
You
yes,
are,
he does.
you are on the air, okay?
Yes, I literally, I mean, I'm from Florida. Nobody leaves Florida. People move to Florida to die. Like, we don't. And so the irony was, though, 2 years later, the company that brought him out here let him go. We owned our house still in Orlando. He had a job offer. I had an online store, so I could work anywhere. And we decided to stay in Utah. We fell in love. It's a great place to raise kids. And so now we're here 11 years later.
How about that?
So let's talk about this disc work and this disc profile, who you help with it, how you help them, what it does, what people can learn from it.
Disc theory is from the 50s, and it really states that everybody is born with natural behavior styles. And we adapt to our circumstances. We can either engage with them or we can shove them down, but we all have natural behavior styles. In times of crisis and conflict, they come out. And so oftentimes humans, we don't realize that we really do celebrate our strengths, but a lot of our strengths come with blind weaknesses that we don't really focus on. And so that's kind of the key when I work with teams, also very often leadership teams or CEOs or people, entrepreneurs that have to build teams. They're really good at what they do. They have a really strong skill set, but building teams and motivating teams is not part of that skill set. So a lot of companies hire managers and supervisors because they're the best at their job, but that does not necessarily correlate with actually running teams. And so that's kind of where I get in and help them really establish what their strengths are, how is that really helping their team, and then for them to do some self-awareness and recognize what's actually hurting the teams also, and what they can do better. And what's really cool with DISC or natural behavior or emotional intelligence is that it's a learned behavior. So you can learn. It might not come natural to you, but it's something that you actually can practice and incorporate. And it's actually easier than people think. Like most people are like, oh, that's just not me. I can't talk in front of people, or I don't have the patience to listen to people. I'm not a people person. Just put me in an office with a computer and I'm good. And they don't realize that they actually can really help teams and help strengthen their teams if they just get out of their box.
So how does it work? Who hires you to do what?
So there's so there's different opportunities to work with me personally. Is I do one-on-one consultings with leadership teams. So each individual members of a team will book time with me. That's been a really fun growth for the last 2 years of doing one-on-one. For many years, I was more into team trainings and off-site events. And then last year, I started taking on one-on-one clients, and I actually really, really enjoy that. It's almost like a therapy session for a lot of these leaders, and it's a really safe place for them that I'm not biased. And so and because I've worked with some of their teams, that I actually know who they're talking about, why they're having these walls that they can't overcome and why they're not breaking through. So that's really fun. But typically I work with actual teams and we do workshops where we learn about their natural behavior style. So DISC is a test you take and you answer a bunch of questions. If you've ever heard of Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or Take Flight or color tests, personality tests, they all stem from the DISC theory. That DISC is the godfather of all the behavior and personality tests. And so we assess them, they take their test, we figure out how much they feel like they relate to it. If they don't relate to it, why? And then how that works in their team and how to best communicate and effectively work with teams that are opposite of you. You know, for example, some people are naturally skeptical, like they need the data, and then other people are naturally wanting to believe in, and they'll take your word for it, or they're just going to go for it. And so when those two people work together, they often get defensive with each other because there's a lack of trust, just because if they think that people should behave the same way that they do. And so we break that down. Most people, I say all the time that the golden rule is what's hurting your relationships, because everybody's raised on, you know, treat others the way that you want to be treated, but it's really, you got to treat others the way that they want to be treated. And so you have to figure that out.
It's an interesting
Rob,
concept.
what size and type of companies are you doing this for?
It has ranged in size from 7 to 100 to 200. Depending on what the team needs. I work with an online platform, Catalyst, so that makes it easier, so they can actually do a lot of self-guided. Once everybody in the company takes the assessments, then their teams can all see each other. And with the help of AI now, it's really cool. You can just type in saying, I need to get Lynn on board with this idea. It's not working. Give me some advice. And they have all Lynn's results and your results, and then it tells you this is the best way to break through to Lynn. So
Wow.
those are kind of
We
cool.
gave up on her. We gave up on her a long time.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating that they do that. I've throughout my career, I think I've taken every single one of those tests, and they're all pretty much end up with the same results. It's just that the follow through and whoever's teaching it and so forth is the key. So
Yeah.
the fact that you're giving it is one thing. The fact that you've become so well respected in your field is the big plus for you and for anybody who chooses to work with you, because you can know what you are, but until you know how to use it, just like you said, it doesn't matter.
Oh yes, it literally changed my life. If you don't know, but there's like a dominant trait in the DISC theory and an outgoing. And so I am naturally very dominant. And so in my late teens, early 20s, when I was put in leadership roles, I was a really bad leader because I didn't understand. With dominant, you know, your ego gets involved a little bit more than it should. And you take things a little bit too, like, do as I say, not as I do. I don't need to answer. I don't need to give you the why because I told you so. That kind of behavior really is the natural way with Ds like me. And so I was not a good leader. I didn't know any better though, because nobody ever taught me that doesn't have to be weaponized, that you can use it as a strength, as dominant, but if you don't gain empathy, then nobody's going to want to follow you. You know, it doesn't matter if you want to be a good leader, if nobody's willing to follow you, that's where you have a problem. And so really being able to take the DISC theory and understand it literally changed my life. And so it's such a useful, easy tool.
Well, you know, you said something that I always thought was quite interesting in the corporate world, how somebody who was excellent at what they did, they knew their job, they could do it better than anybody else. And so they were promoted. And now they're in charge of everybody else who supposedly does what they do. And they are not good leaders. How do you change the mindset of the people above on who gets promoted? And also my follow-up question is, how much does it matter if the leader is considered an expert at what they're leading?
Well, one of the first things we talk about amongst leaders in general is the best leaders know that they don't need to be the smartest in the room. And so oftentimes when leaders are promoted because of their expertise, they feel like they have to hold on to that. As everybody knows I'm the expert, I have to be the expert, and that takes priority. So their ego gets involved. And so that's the one key that we try to change, is realizing that you get to be the expert in something. Like, that is awesome. You don't have to be an expert in all the things, and you want your team to add value. And if they don't feel like they add value, they don't feel like they're going to be able to be innovative because you don't trust them, or you're not engaging them, or you're not helping them grow, then your whole business structure fails. Because you can't rely on one person. And so we work through things like that. There's often times where leaders don't want to delegate because they feel like if they delegate, then that looks bad on them. So they take on more than they can, or they suffer with imposter syndrome. So they say yes to way more things than they should say yes to, because they don't want anybody to think that they don't know how to do it. So most of the toxic leadership traits come from insecurities and ways of handling that toxically, and so when you can get leaders to really understand and get self-aware on what they bring to the team, but what their team needs to be able to bring to the organization, it really becomes powerful.
I totally
People recognize that they have a problem and they need you.
Right. So recognizing they have a problem is not usually on a personal level. That tends to be the hardest, is individuals realizing they have a problem. But when you have a high turnover, when you have lack of communication, it really does affect your bottom line. And when you're dealing in today's environment, like, innovation is huge. And so if you don't have a foundation of trust, you're not going to be competitive. And so when they just start realizing that their team is not jiving, when their team is just not working together, when there's too much side complaints, side conversations, people aren't looking out for each other's best interests. They're looking for each other to fail more so. Those are the kind of triggers and flags that you look for to say, like, we've got to fix something. Another big flag is when there's no conflict. I often talk when you're in a room and there's no somebody fighting back or arguing back or saying this is maybe not the best idea. That can be a problem too, because if you don't have healthy conflict, you're not growing and being innovative. So if you have a whole team of yes men, that's not a good sign either.
Interesting.
But my question is a little deeper than that.
Okay.
Like, so people listen to this podcast, and like, some of the out of cash, they call us because they got a problem. Like, they can't pay their bills, right?
Yeah.
Or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem you are trying to solve for is software.
Yes.
But also potentially very potent.
Yeah.
So my question for you, not to override it, is how do they get there? How do they figure out they have a problem?
Well, with owners, when you can't keep talent in, so you can't recruit and keep A players. So it's interesting because you talk about, and you want to build A players on a team. And sometimes they talk about like the diva who can get things done, and it might be difficult to work with, but they're excellent at what they do and you need them on your team. So it's really a matter of a leader realizing that they don't need their team to be well-rounded. They don't need all of the people below them to be understanding and get it and motivating. The leader has to be able to accept the team's behavior styles and work with them in a way that it doesn't make it toxic for everybody else. And so if you can't keep talent, if you don't like to work with people, then you need to find a right-hand man. Your second in charge needs to be that person. But when you feel like there's a lack of innovation, a lack of trust, a lack of accountability, a lack of vulnerability, those are all signs that your team is not working at a high functioning level. There is tons of research out there that talks about high functioning teams and how they fail often. They fail fast, they fail forward, and they fail often. And that kind of environment only works when you have a foundation of trust. Because if you don't allow for people to be able to fail and learn from that, then they're just going to stay complacent and get, their hourly in, get just what's expected of them, and stay safe. And so if you want to be big players, you need teams that are willing to try new ideas. Back in, I think Amazon was the team that any of their leaders or supervisors weren't allowed to say no to an idea. If you wanted to say no to an idea, you had to write a 2-page report on why you were saying no that was then posted to everybody else. And so it was really discouraged to turn down bad ideas for Amazon because no leader had time to write a 2-page report on why they were saying no. And so they really had this mentality environment of what's new, what's possible, what are we not thinking about, what are we not doing? And you can't do that without a level of trust. You can't have a foundation of trust if you don't understand everybody. You don't get to know what makes them motivated, what are their vulnerabilities, how to accept vulnerabilities and turn it into a strength. So if your team's not working, or you can't keep people in, or you keep having to repeat yourself over and over, you don't know how to give feedback, you don't know how to correct these issues, that's when you get somebody outside to help.
Okay, how do you go about finding clients?
Unfortunately, I'm really bad at sales. I'm not gonna lie. I think I did cold emails for a hot 2 months, or 2 weeks, not even 2 months. I didn't last. Most of my clients are word of mouth, which has been nice, but it's not a really good growth strategy. So truthfully, that is one of my hardest is sales. But word of mouth has been typically my.
And where do you hang out? And what are your interests outside of all this?
I just was talking to somebody else. It's really hard to be a mom entrepreneur and have any other kind of passions. So my passions tend to be my work. I volunteer on a lot of boards. I am the chair of Women in Leadership for Silicon Slopes, and Silicon Slopes here in Utah is the tech incubator, which has been really great in Utah. We're one of the fastest growth tech startups and success rates out of all the states. And so being a part of that's been really exciting. I just accepted the position as president of my Chamber of Commerce, our West Jordan Chamber of Commerce. One of my big passions is really kind of helping the underdogs. And back in the day, the Chamber of Commerce was a place to go for small businesses and people for growth. And now we have a lot of larger Chamber of Commerces that become conglomerates that are really big, and I personally don't think they care about the little cities. And so I'm very excited to really build up our Chamber of Commerce in our city and bring the same things that I've learned with Silicon Slopes and the ecosystem there and the capital of knowledge and people and who and bring that to West Jordan. And then I also serve on the board of the Utah Foster Care, which is another passion of mine.
Happy to come talk to you. Happy to talk to you to your Chamber of Commerce. That
would be great. It's right now it's a little bit of a sinking ship that I'm trying to hold on to. So I'm going to get it rebuilt up and get it going. And I'm really excited about that potential to grow. So as soon as I saw participating in our networking events and our mastermind events and our lunch and learns, I will definitely hit you up to.
Good luck.
I do not think you have time for anything else, considering your business, all the boards you serve on, and having children. Good for you.
How many kids, Robin? How many kids?
I have 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls.
And she's friends with Deb Gabor.
Deb Gabor has been a great asset in my life. She has been one of the women that I know I can call with any type of question, need for advice, she's a good one. She's a rock star.
I love it. Are you doing any public speaking?
You know what? It's funny. Deb especially, I told her I didn't like doing webinars back earlier in the year. And she said, she's like, that's not a thing. Like, you have to like doing webinars. She's like, you can't in this day and age not. And so I started doing more webinars, and I actually really enjoy them. Once you get used to them and you're familiar, because I'm used to speaking in front of people, you like their energy and their crowd, and it's really hard to adjust. But so I do a few emceeing jobs. I'm doing an MC opportunity this Thursday for a great group of women. I'm doing a podcast. We have our SHRM events here that they started a new program, which is really great to keep the professionals that are looking for work that are currently out of work to keep in the mix and keep learning and growing. So that's really exciting. So I'll be speaking at one of their events in a couple weeks.
That's great.
And then I have a couple client workshops coming up.
Is there a transformation story that you are most proud of?
I don't know about transformation, but specifically, I have worked with it's such an easy change of heart with these teams. And so one of the first teams I worked with were 3 men that were starting a business together. They were all best friends before, and they were coming together to start this, multi-million-dollar endeavor. And we sat down to just do disc to see, because like I said, most people just assume, especially in friendships, because we all just adjust to make everybody else feel comfortable. And so most of the time we take for granted that other people are adjusting to make us feel comfortable. And so we assume that we know their natural behavior styles, but we don't realize we're actually putting them in a lot of anxiety and stress, but they don't want to be conflict, either they are conflict avoidant. And so working with this one specific team and just realizing little things that with different behavior styles, one of the 3 of them has more of an emotional response to things that go wrong. That was his idea. For as simple as finding the restaurant for the 3 of them to meet. They would fly in from out of town. He would have to choose a restaurant, and he would ask them if it was okay, send multiple messages, and would double check, triple check, because his natural behavior style is if the restaurant was a bad choice, it looked bad on him, and that they would blame him. So it was very stressful for him. And the partners didn't realize that, because they don't have that innate. If the restaurant's bad, that's just the restaurant. It's no reflection on them, so they don't care. And so it was very little things like that to realize, oh, this person really thrives in processes and procedures. And if you say something and you expect something, they want to see it all the way through before they pivot to something else. And if you're making them pivot and change their mind all the time, or get on different projects all the time, it puts them in very high stressful, anxiety inducing roles. There's my type of personality who I pivot all the time. I never see anything through. So you can see where that really causes conflicts in partnerships, when they don't understand why the other person isn't behaving the same way. And so that was something that was very common in most leadership teams that I come in contact with, is they just don't understand each other. And it's so much easier when you realize you don't have to take things personal. Like, they're not getting on your nerves on purpose. If you have a partner who is extremely detail oriented, we call that an analytical. They don't think or live in the gray area. They don't assume, they don't infer. And so if you're the type of person that always lives in like the big picture, the gray, we'll figure it out, you can see that there's a lot of conflict that comes involved when you give your analytical partner details or checklists. They do the checklist, but you don't tell them the why behind it. They might do it not to your liking, because you assume they're on the same page as you. They assume like why this list is the way it is, but they don't think that way. They see the list, they take it at face value. They don't go any deeper than that. And so being able to help partners just realize that You have to be able to communicate in the way that the other person best receives it. And it's so simple. And I've never gone through a training or a consultation or event where people have not like been so grateful and so like, oh, I get it. Like it's just the easiest way to start the foundation of transformation to teamwork and trust, honestly, because everything is a foundation of trust.
Awesome.
Great. Great.
Robin, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much for all your wisdom and sharing everything you're doing for our community. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks. I really enjoy being a
All
part
right.
of your community.
And
Thank you
Robin,
so
where
much.
can people find you if they
Well,
want to contact you?
I am Robin Huling everywhere on every social media. My company is warnercommunication.com. There's no S at that. At the time, I thought it was really fun because it was a play off of effective communication. And now everybody wants to spell it with an S. So it is warnercommunication.com or robinhuling.com. And I'm Robin Huling on all social medias.
It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you
Thank
so
you. It
much
was so
for being
fun.
here.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank
Take care.
you.